Hey there, and welcome to ProFlows Plus. I'm Cameron, and welcome to this lesson on parallaxing in this series. So, in this particular lesson, our next step now is to import in our Photoshop file. So, I've got our Photoshop file selected here. I've got 5 Photoshop files, and they're kept the same name as the JPEG that I originally worked with, but now they've got PSD because they're layered files, as you saw in the previous lesson. So I've got all of them selected. The important thing here is that you want to change import as footage to import as composition retain layer sizes. Okay. So you want to make sure composition retain layer sizes. You could do composition retain layer sizes is always where I go, just because it looks at every layer and says this is the size of the layer. Let's bring it in that way. So I'm gonna click open, and it's gonna bring them all in here. It's gonna import them all in. And there we go. So what it's doing here is you can see there's folders now. Here's the compositions. Here's the folders with all of the layers inside of them. There's a few different ways you can approach this, but how we're going to do this is we're going to double click. So we've got scene 5 here. So we're going to double click band. And you can see here is our scene. It's huge. We're going to make sure that all the layers are selected and hit Command C to copy. We're going to go into scene 5 here. Command V, okay? We're gonna extend the layers so they go through the whole comp. We can't see them, right? Because if I turn off the original, they're not there. That's because for whatever reason, they're way over here, okay? So we're just gonna, all of them are selected. I'm just bringing them over here as one big group. We're going to tick 3D, so they're all 3D. We're going to add a new camera layer, new camera. Make sure it's one node, that's how I like to work. 35 is great. We don't need depth of field. We'll click OK. Hit C on our keyboard to have the camera tool, and we're going to zoom out. Okay, and we're just pulling back here just to get an idea for how to frame this back up, right? Essentially, we have to reframe it. So if I turn on my background image here, just for reference, and I hit C again on my camera tool, and I can kind of just, it doesn't have to be perfect, just getting a general lineup. So right there, that works. If you don't understand how to use a 3D camera, you need to go back into the 3D lessons, 2.5D lessons that are in ProFlows. Okay, you need to go back. You need to check them out. If you really don't understand them at all, you need to check out AE Academy Volume 1 and Volume 2. So I'm going to turn off the original. I'm going to lock it because it's there for us to reference. So there we go. So if I turn on this layer that says original, that's our background. So I'll leave it on for now. So we'll close off that pre-comp. We'll go to scene 4. We're going backwards here. So let's go to scene 4. And scene 4 is Simon. So we'll double click Simon. And let it load. There it is. We're going to select all of these layers. Command C to copy. Go into scene 4. Command V to paste. And again, they're all somewhere. So let's bring them in over here. Something like this. Let's make them 3D. Let's add another new camera. We'll keep it 35. Zoom out here. And let's make sure our background is turned off and our original's on so we can kind of see what's going on here. Something like this. I'm actually going to select all my layers again and just position them this way. And then hit C. Zoom back out. So just something like that. The reason I moved these layers left, right, up, and down versus the camera this time is because I just realized when I make my text 3D, see, it's going to fly off somewhere. And when I have moved the camera so much, like I did on scene 5, when I make these two 3D, yeah, see, they really change positions. It's just a different way to work with them. There's a lot of different ways you can work with 3D inside of After Effects. So obviously this is really small. It's really far back there, but that's okay for now. So scene 4 is pretty much set up. Let's go into scene 3. This is musician. So let's find musician. Let's double click that one. Select all those, copy. You could add, a 3D camera to this scene and do it this way, but just based on our workflow that we've already set up, this is why I'm doing the approach I'm doing. And bringing it in, making it 3D, adding a new camera, and zooming out, turning off the background, making sure I've got all these layers selected and just kind of moving things like that. Perfect. And obviously all of our type is getting very tiny, but for now we're leaving it. Turn off the background, reference layer, turn back on the 3D background. Let's make sure that this background is off, locked. This background is on, perfect. I'm gonna take the camera to the top of my layer stack for all of these. This is me just being OCD about things. Okay. Scene 2, so this is Nathan. So let's find Nathan, we'll double click it. Select everything, copy. Scene 2, paste, make them 3D. Add a, let's bring them all up here. Add a new camera. And let's zoom out. Let's turn off the background of that one. So we can kind of see where we're going here. Select our layers. V, and kind of move them into position. C, zooming in. V, moving the layers again. C, right there. Perfect. Turn off the reference layer. Turn on our background there. We're good to go. Make this text 3D. And it's really tiny again. Something like that. And let's bring the camera. Top of layer stack. Boom. All right. Scene 1, drummer. Double click. Select all the layers. Command C to copy. Command V to paste. Make them all 3D. Turn off the background there. Add a new camera. Okay. And we'll zoom out. And we'll select all the layers here. And bring them into place here. And we'll zoom out some more. V. And once you master the keyboard shortcuts, it's going to make your workflow much quicker. Lock the background reference, turn it off, and then turn on our 3D background. And make tool 3D as well. Something like this. Okay, and we can close off all these comps. Perfect. So now if we go back here, type looks really funny. But everything pretty much lines up except for the type, imagery wise, to how we built our assembly edit. So now it's the fun part, right? We've done all this pre work that require it's pretty heavy in terms of cutting images out and laying things out and things like that. But now we can get in with our camera. I'm at P for position, and we can really just start playing around with what looks best. Now we want our scenes to have a flow to them. We don't want like one scene to be pushing really fast in on scene 1, and then scene 2 we're really quickly moving across it, and scene 3 we're really quickly moving down. Like it just doesn't. That's not visually pleasing to our eyes. So we need to have. They don't all have to have the same movement, but they need to be. It needs to be a coherent visual piece. So, there's different ways you could approach this. We could do something where maybe we're pushing in very slowly on scene 1, and then scene 2, we're still pushing in very slowly. And scene 3, we're pushing in very slowly. And scene 4, until we get to the final scene. So that's probably how I would start, is just doing a consistent kind of type of push in on these scenes, because that cuts, in between each one of them, and it's a continual movement, right? So it's pleasing to our eye. I could also try and do something where maybe I kind of pan across the scene. That'd be kind of cool. That would be kind of interesting for this shot for sure. This one, this one, this one, and this one. So actually, why don't we try and do a combination where we're moving across and kind of pushing in? I did no testing, as I said previously, on the camera and things like that for this. So this is all brand new. This is going to be trial and error. So let's just try that. Let's just try kind of moving across and in. So we're going to set a keyframe for the position. Maybe where we're at right now. Let's just start with where we're at, and let's see. Let's push in just a little bit. Doesn't need to be a whole lot of motion here, okay? And maybe to the side, okay? Now, every layer here is on the same plane right now, okay? So that's why it still looks like we're just pushing in on a photograph, right? But the second that we start giving these layers some dimension, that's when everything changes. So I'm gonna select all these layers. I'm gonna hit P for position. I'm also gonna hold down Shift S for scale. When we're doing this technique, it's all about the position and the scale. Okay, so let me show you why. Okay, so a good way to do this is maybe you can take a snapshot like here. You can have your reference image like we saved here. So maybe we'll take the reference image to the top. This is just for visual reference, okay? So I'm gonna hit T for transparency. I'm gonna turn down the transparency to 50%, turn it on. Okay, so there is our original. Okay, I'm gonna lock this layer, okay, so that nothing moves, or I can't move it. Now, what this is doing is, actually, let me scale it down. I just want to get it lined up a little bit better. Okay, so for this little trick I'm going to show you, you want to go to, is it difference, I believe? Difference. And you're going to want to align things here so that everything lines up and it turns black. Oops. That is the goal. So let's make the transparency 100%. And scale, let's try 33. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, okay? This is just a, see how it's getting darker? Ooh, we're real close right there, okay? I'm just using my keyboard to nudge up and down. That's actually good enough for me, okay? So I'm gonna go back to T for transparency, 50% difference is gonna go back to normal, and we're gonna lock the layer. Now, the reason I did this is because when I start repositioning these foreground and middle ground layers, like I'm gonna do now, it's gonna throw off the scale of everything. And I want to kind of keep the same proportional scale. So for instance, the foreground, we wanna bring the foreground forward, right? We're gonna bring it forward in space. So it just depends on your scene and how much you need to move it. I like to work typically with larger even numbers, but maybe for this we'll do negative 250. Now you can see, especially up in here and here, that the scale is not the same, right? So maybe now for the scale, because I brought it closer to camera, I need to reduce the scale. That's too much. So let's try 90, maybe 95. That's pretty close, okay? So that works for me. Next we've got the drums, which we're gonna leave the drums at 0, but we're gonna take the drummer back in space. So we took the foreground negative 250 pixels forward. Let's take the drummer 250 pixels back. And, I didn't really notice a whole lot there, so maybe 500. Okay, and the reason I can't see him is because, so we're gonna undo that, 250. I've got this background layer on, okay? And so the background is actually, he's going behind the background and he's part of the background. So let's take the background back to 500, okay? So this is where the painting is gonna come into play. We're gonna have to paint out some things and things like that. But, so So the background's back there. Let's scale it up. Maybe 105. We took it way up. 105. Maybe something like that. The drummer. Maybe the drummer needs to be 105. And the background needs to be 110. Yeah, that looks pretty close. So let's turn off our reference image. Now, like, you're going to see some duplicates here, okay? Because like I said, we have to do some painting to really remove some items and things like that, covering up. But this is our rough motion, just to see if we can make things have some parallax to them, okay? So then it's going to play back here. Okay, so there's some parallaxing happening here, but there's not quite enough. The camera move is enough for me. So let's increase it. So let's go the foreground, let's make it -500. Let's make the middle ground is still 0. We'll make the drummer 500 and we'll make the background 1000. And let's see what this looks like. That's looking a little bit better. Let's actually change it to half res here so we can get through it a little quicker. We're working with some bigger images here. There it goes. Right, so it's just enough that it's looking fairly interesting to me. Now I see some things happening here, like these double drums, things like that, that I, obviously these would have to be painted out. Another way that we could get past some of this stuff is if we use like a longer lens for our camera. So let's try that. Let's just try camera settings, layer, new camera settings. Let's try an 80mm just to see how quickly, or how fast, not how fast, how much it zoomed in on this. So if we take both of these keyframes now and just push them back, we're also going to get some interesting depth of field doing this technique. Let's go ahead and bring tool. Let's bring it really far forward. So our foreground is -500. So let's bring tool forward -1000. So you can tell here we're working with increments of 500 pixels, right? We're going to want to scale up this guy back to 100. Still might be too small. Yeah, it's probably too small. Maybe 125. Now you can really see the parallaxing happening on the type there. I'm also going to make my camera move upwards here instead of something like that. And maybe we'll back it up just a little bit more here, just to give it a little bit more. We'll push in here just a hair more. And now I really want to give it even more depth. So let's bring the foreground. Now it's funny because the foreground we're barely even seeing. It's just right up there in the corner. And if I make it, let's say -700, this is where it's fun to actually start cheating some of your moments. So we could bring this guy, like this guitar that's out of focus in the foreground here, and maybe make it at negative. Actually, let's do -1500. It's all about playing around at this point, right? And we just want to see just a little bit of it. So maybe like right there. That's nice. Let's take the background even farther back. So let's go -1500. And let's bring the drummer back 1000. See how that looks. It's creating even more of a parallax. Maybe he's back 1500 and the background's 2500. Now we're really pushing things back, right? But it's creating even more parallax here. You can see it. Right now it's got some weird stuff going on. Well, there's that. That's the background. So the background, we're gonna have to really do some serious painting on it to make it look right. That's gonna be kind of our finishing up. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. We could also give the drummer a little bit of motion, right? So let's just highlight that drummer there. And let's do the puppet pen tool and put a little dot there. Maybe a dot here. I don't even know how this guy would be moving the correct way. But, you know, maybe it's something, I don't know. Oh, we don't want that. And we don't want that. We just want it to be something real subtle. I don't want to stretch him too much. Yeah, that looks pretty funky. Just adding a point down here so he doesn't bend so much down there. You know, it's all just a matter of taste. It doesn't have to be a whole lot of movement here. So you can just see he's barely moving, right? That's the effect we're going for. Kind of like this ultra slow motion type of look. Maybe that'll work. Yeah, so you can see him, he's just barely moving there. But it looks actually pretty dope. I'm going to look at the background here and just... Because when I add the background, that's when you can see all of this extra stuff that's popping in that we don't want. Right? Now, like this symbol back here works. There's duplicates here. There's duplicates here. This is stuff that we're going to have to deal with. And the easiest way to do that is just do Command E. And what that does is it loads up our file here inside of Photoshop. Here's our background. And this is where you just start going to town and you start painting out things. So basically, it's me wanting to come in here and take probably the clone stamp tool, making a pretty large, you know, selection. So I'm going to hold down Alt or Option here, and I'm just painting out, right? Just like this, painting out. Now you gotta have to be really careful because, like you see here, I painted in this red, and it got this, you know, edge up here, which I don't want. Undo. Undo it again. There's a lot of yellow down in here, right? So that's something we need to be aware of as well. We could also bring in like maybe some fog layers and cover some of this up as well. That might work. Not totally sure. It's just a process of just, you know, going through and just doing just like this, right? And just taking your time, finding what works, what doesn't work. You don't want to have things be too repetitive when you're painting like this. You have to be careful. A lot of times what I'll do is I will paint like maybe, you know, like that. Command S to save. And then I'm going to jump back. It's saving. It's done. As soon as it's done, I'm going to jump back into After Effects and it's going to update. And there it goes. It's updating and boom. So, you know, now that's what it looks like. It's removed some of the duplicates there. There's obviously still some duplicates here. I need to fix his arm and things like that. But that's the process to paint out the background, which I'll go into that in the next lesson. and really, do some more with that. But for right now, we're just working on the scene. So that one, that's looking pretty good for me for now. Going into this one, let's go again, layer, camera settings. Let's do 80 again. Just so we can really, push in on these scenes and get away with a little bit more. On this one, I spent some time cutting out this guy over here, but that may not work for this one. So let's give the text, what did we do in the scene one? We did the text at -1000. So let's do that again here. -1000. Bring the scale up to about 100. Let's bring main dude. Let's bring him forward 500. Yeah, this guy we're not even seeing at all. And this guy needs to be painted out. Okay, that's the background. So this shot could be a little bit more simple for sure. I actually like this framing a lot right here. So maybe I'll start. Maybe end up with something like this. Or reverse. I'm selecting both. Right frame, right click, time reverse keyframes. So now we're moving like so. And like this shot, it's gonna be a little bit easier to paint out some of the stuff. So I'd probably remove this guy altogether right there. So let's just Command E, it opens it up. I'm gonna go to my background here. And I don't need to see any of this guy, right? So I'm just gonna click in here. Maybe actually like right here. Let's just get rid all of this right here. Undo that one. Probably gonna sample from down here maybe. Let's Command S, let's save this. Let's see how this looks. Jump back into After Effects. Let's push this back in here. Maybe about 1,000. And I should have brought the main dude -500. That's the problem. Okay. So you can see there, that's looking pretty good, except for his hair, of course, which we need to go back and fix that. Actually, I think I'm going to reverse these keyframes. Yeah, I like that. It'd also be fun. So sometimes when I can't decide totally on what kind of camera I want to do, I'm going to do Command D. I'm going to duplicate that camera. I'm going to lock it, turn it off, hit P for position on my new camera. And I like how this ends. So I'm going to turn off the keyframes and then turn them back on. And then go to the beginning here. And I want to try like a vertical move here. Something like this. Because it's nice to see some background imagery like we see here. We can really tell there's some depth going on here. Bring this guy over. And I'm gonna look at, okay, so 1050. Let's make it 1050. I like even numbers. I'm gonna go back here and make this 1050 as well. This is the X. So now we're just kind of moving upwards like so. Cool. Okay. So we have scene 1 and scene 2. So then what I would do would be I go to scene 1 and 2 and I'd hit in for out, and I'm just going to preview these and see how the motion works together. Okay, so there it goes. First shot's really awesome. Second shot could use a little bit more depth to it. I really like the puppet tool on the first guy. So this one, let's do the same thing here. Let's jump in here, and I want to see where is Black Sabbath is negative 1,000 and main dude is negative 500. So maybe if I make Black Sabbath even bigger here, it's gonna be a little bit more of a move, which I like. Yeah. And then main dude, let's go with the puppet pen tool again. And let's just add point up in here, point here. I don't know, point here. Here so nothing moves. Here so nothing moves. I'm not by any means a master of the puppet tool. I like to play around with it and see what I think, looks nice. It's just, and it's fun too, the kind of, the results that you can get. Just needs to be subtle. Yeah, it looks like he's like raising his arm. Up in the air. Let's go half res here. Let's check this one out. See how it looks. It's looking pretty cool. I like it. Yeah, that's nice. And this kind of stuff it helps. It actually might be too much movement. It can start to look a little creepy if it's too much. See, it looks like his arm's actually shrinking a little bit. So let's just decrease that just a little bit. Less is more. Always remember that. Less is more. Okay. I know as motion designers, a lot of us want to just go over the top. We want it to look so cool. And we put too much into it and then it doesn't look good. Okay. So that works for scene 2. So now for scene 3, let's change layer camera settings. Let's make it 80 as well. And remember, we can always go back just to jump around here all over the place. We can always do things where, like, let's say for the camera here, that we turn on depth of field and we set our focus distance. Now you have to be careful because the type's in here, but you could do things where you crank up the aperture and you focus in on something like if I go to 2 views here. I don't want to see the duplicates of the background here. So I could do something where I set, a focus distance. Oh, I don't think it's actually going to work for this. It's not. It was a good idea. So I'll turn it back off. But I thought it'd be fun to add a little bit more depth of field to this. But, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So here we are. Let's set a keyframe here. So I'm going to go back. So we're going, okay, across. Let's change this to half res as well. So we're going in, up. Maybe this is kind of like a left. So, okay, so we're going in, up. It'd be kind of nice to be more focused on the guitar here. Excuse me. So let's just see. And the other cool thing is we never have to, if we don't feel like we need to include the entire image, we don't need to do that, right? See. Like I know that this background is going to create some issues for me, right? With painting. So if I don't have to show that, maybe I don't show that, right? So maybe I'm just up here and focused on this dude. And maybe it's something like, I don't know, maybe something like this. So let's just do position negative 1500, bring it forward. Main dude is at 0. Well, let's bring that guy forward. Let's bring him forward negative 1000, negative 750. And then we'll do that guy is right where he's at. And the background is going to be pushed back, you know, maybe 1000. And then we're going to scale it up so we can line some things back up. Like so. So things are, you know, there's some duplicates definitely going on here, but let's see what happens. And then we'll just do like another move here. Maybe like so, and we'll bring that position of that background up. So what I'm doing now is I'm creating a lot of painting for myself, which I just said I did not want to do, but you know, sometimes it's worth it, depending on how cool you want to make it look, right? So I don't want to pull this up too much there. I'm just kind of repositioning some things here. Let's bring the scale of this guy up 100%. Let's just see how that looks. Okay, so there it goes. And it looks good. I want to do a little bit more. I really like to push in on this shot. So maybe it's kind of like a pull out of this shot, right? So let's double click it and maybe let's just start a little tighter here. And then we just kind of pull out to this kind of movement. And then the background, I just don't want to paint. I want to paint as little as possible. And maybe scale it up here. And maybe pull back a little bit more, something like that. And for something like this, we could actually even bring over the second guy. Since we painted him out, we might as well use him, right? So he could be maybe in here. What's his position? He is at 0. The background's at that. Yeah, and he helps hide some stuff. I like that. Just add some visual interest. So there we go. Works for me. Let's move on to scene 4. And for scene 4, we need to make sure that this camera is... You know what? Let's just leave this one at 35. Let's get crazy here. P for position. This one I just see a straight up like push in between these arms. I think that's going to be really, really nice. So what we need to do here is we have our background. Let's take it back to 1000. Middle ground will be 500. This one will be 0, and this one will be negative 500. And then scale this guy up to 100 like we've been doing for the other ones. And then position will be negative 1500, something like that. And if we just push into this, let's just see. I thought this one might be a little bit easier to do. They're never easy, right? There's always so much work involved when you're parallaxing, but man, the results can be so awesome. So I don't want to push all the way over here. Let's just see. That looks okay. I think I want to try and reverse these. So keyframe assistant, I right clicked time reverse keyframes so we can pull out. And let's see if I can maybe hide a few of these weird artifacts. Not artifacts, but you get what I'm saying. So let's scale this guy down. All right, I'm just kind of trying to hide some of these. So I feel like on this one, I may need to create a little bit more overall depth. I may need to kind of just separate things a little bit more. So maybe foreground is -1000. Deftones, let's make this 0. Okay, we're gonna set it back in there. We're gonna do -500. And we're gonna push the background way back there, 1500 maybe. Gonna do some scales. That could be pretty interesting if we can make this work with the background. Yeah, so we're gonna have to do a lot of painting on this one, but I think that'll look pretty dope. And then on this guy, this final shot, let's go back to an 80mm. That seems to work better. It was nice to test it out on that last shot, but I think having a longer lens helps. This one, we're just going to push in on it. It's going to look pretty good, I think. We'll turn off the... Okay, so there's the original. We're actually going to create a new solid here. And we're just going to sample this color. And this is going to be our background. And I didn't spell it right, but that's okay. Turn off the original. There's our background. And we'll just lock it. And we'll push back some of these. So maybe this one's way back here, 1500. I'm going to scale it up so it kind of comes back into place. Like that. Main will stay at 0. What is this one here? So we'll bring these maybe 1000, -1000. And then we'll scale them down a little bit. And move them into position. Where are they at? Something like that. And then bring these guys really far forward. Play with the scale, just kind of line some stuff up here. Maybe able to get by without a little less painting on this one. We shall see. -1500. Don't want to do that. Let's scale these together. Maybe something like that. And then P for position again. And I'm bringing him farther, closer to the camera. And we're just going to zoom in on these guys. And kind of push up into it like this. Scale them up again. So these last guys, these are like driving me insane here. Okay, so let's go positive 2000. See how that looks. Nope. I think it's because we're on a white background. It just kind of really throws the perspective off. So maybe if we just do instead of pushing in, maybe if we just do like a movement like this, maybe that'll work better. And for this one, we want to do a keyframe easy ease in because we want to come to a rest on this title, and we'll probably do that, maybe have it come to a rest about here. So I'll drag that forward, and I don't want quite so much movement here. Start right there. Okay, so let's preview this and see how it looks. Okay, so let's turn the music on for this and check it out.
Audio. Audio.
Okay, so there's certain things working really well and certain things not. So this first shot works great minus the painting that needs to happen here. This second shot works great minus the painting that needs to happen here. This shot, I think it works. This shot into this shot they're very similar shots. So I think I might reverse this. Probably reverse this one. Just to give a little bit of variance to the camera move. And then on this one, I don't like how it comes to a stop and then just sits there. I think it should be a constant movement. So that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna double click this, select both camera keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes just to see. And then for this one, we will have it come to a stop, but it needs to not happen until much later. And actually, we're going to turn off the stop. So let's just have it continually move through it. I just want to start a little bit higher up here so we see it in the frame. And then it's just like this. I also want to give a little bit, it's with all these hands here, it's going to be a lot more interesting to see some depth here with these hands. So I'm going to cheat some of them. Probably bring them forward more. Really bring them forward. Something like this. That's actually probably too much. Maybe somewhere in the middle and here. Bring down the scale a little bit. And it'd be cool to have this guy, the main dude, do a little bit of motion, maybe with his leg. Actually, not with his leg, probably with his arm, like so. Maybe something, and then maybe his head kind of tilts back. And maybe he moves into this position. So yeah, that looks pretty funny. You just set a key or a puppet pin back in here so that he doesn't move. You know, I don't want him to distort. Like I said, puppet pin is very subtle. Just to give it a little bit of movement. I don't know. That might be too much. You know, it could also be fun with this is adding like a little bit of camera rotation to this. So it's not a completely Y move. Maybe it's just like a slight bit of rotation, and that can also hide some things. Like when we're moving, like you can see here. So he's moving, so it looks okay. But let's just hit Shift R for rotation, Z rotation. And we want to end with it pretty much how we see it here, but maybe we could start, you know, maybe that way, or maybe, I don't know. That could be kind of cool. We don't want too much, right? Maybe we actually go past it just a hair. So we start -6 and maybe we end +2, and maybe we start -4. Don't want to be too much here. I don't know. I like how that's looking. It may not work, but I think, you know, with that being said, it'd be kind of fun to do some other moves. Like this one could use a rotation. Maybe 2 degrees, maybe 1, and maybe -2. Kind of comes like that. Yeah, that's nice. So then the last scene, it's just too much. So we'll go -2 to a +1, like that. And then that one's good. This is nice. And maybe we just add just a hair bit of rotation here. -1 to +1. Save, and that is going to wrap it up for this lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to look at probably painting some things out and making it look a little bit better. Let's move on.